All right, today we're going to be diving into heat acclimation. So, as summer is right around the corner, we're in kind of that limbo time period where one day it's going to be a little cold, little chilly, and then the next day could be scorching. And so the body is just getting thrown every which way in regards to what it's being asked to navigate and deal with from a temperature perspective. And so, with all that, there is an acclimation period to where the body goes through a lot of physiological changes to best cope with each of those temperature transitions. And so as we now go from cold to hot, we're going to dive into how this impacts your fueling, how this impacts your hydration to make sure that you are as prepared as possible to make that adaptation as seamlessly as possible to make sure that your performance doesn't take a step back anywhere. And this is why May kind of is a sneaky hard month. It just kind of creeps in there where you're like, man, wasn't quite expecting that. And it's really because of that acclimation period to where the body's just being asked to do a whole lot. Your fitness is going to be great. Your fitness is going to be on point. All the training that you were doing, both indoors and potentially outside in the cooler temperatures, is paying off. You are fit, but you haven't developed that heat tolerance quite yet. And the gap between those two aspects of things is really where performance can break down. And it can be a very frustrating time period as well. So today, that's what we're going to dive into of what acclimation is, how long to kind of expect that to take, and what to do to be able to optimize that and potentially kind of like speed that up a little bit, but more so what to just expect from your body during this time. And then how this applies, whether you're heading into showcase weekends where you're really trying to be able to put your best foot forward, whether you're going into different tournaments, states, whatever have you, any competitions that are going on with all of this, you're going to want to be able to make sure that you're mindful of just in general how your body is responding and coping with the heat changes. So the first hot day is really where some of these challenges lie. And one specific study really showed kind of what this effect is. This study was looking at one specific endurance race. It was a marathon, and it was the exact same race, exact same location, but one was taken at one time period right off the bat, super hot out. And then race number two was same location, same temperature, and same overall environment scenario, but 2 months later. And so again, same runners, same location, same route, and everything there, same temperature and just atmosphere differences there, but like was the same. Race one, 15 heat illness cases. The body was not adapted, and a lot of people suffered, for lack of a better term, with that. Come race two, 2 months later, 0 cases. Now, they are absolutely coming into these races well trained, well fit, ready to take it on, but the difference in how the body responded, very, very, very noticeable. And the difference is the body wasn't adapted for that very first race. Came out hot, ready to go physically, but physiologically, internally, the body wasn't ready to navigate both the physical demands and the temperature demands that it was being asked of. So again, the weather didn't change. Athletes still fit in both scenarios, but clearly 15 heat illness cases versus 0. Big difference. And again, that safety piece really just comes back to the fact that their bodies over those 2 months had time to adapt, and they were just better able to manage that heat. And so that's where we want to dive into what heat acclimation actually is. Like, what's going on? What was the difference between that first race and that second race? One of the big things is your sweat efficiency during all this time. Your body is going to start to learn to begin to sweat sooner and more efficiently when it gets hot out, and just in general when you start to exercise. And so by sweating sooner, it's exactly what it sounds like. You're going to start to perspire, you're going to get those beads of sweat popping up, because that's how your body cools itself off. It's going to get that signal of, hey, we're about to do some physical activity, or the temperature's starting to creep up. I need to get ahead of this. I'm going to start sweating, start perspiring to bring that temperature down. When I say it's going to sweat more efficiently, this means that as your body adapts, the sodium concentration in your sweat actually decreases. The body is going to hold on to that sodium a little bit better, which is going to aid your body's ability to retain water and fluid when you consume it, to be able to rehydrate your body. So in the beginning, your body's losing a lot of extra sodium, and we need to make sure that we replace that. But again, Overall sweat efficiency, that's what the body's going to improve upon as you get acclimated a bit better. The other thing is your heart rate is going to start to drop as a result of that acclimation. When you step into that hot environment, it is a stressor on the body. And if you're not acclimated, it's going to cause that heart rate to go up. And when the heart rate goes up, that fatigue sets in a bit quicker. The other thing it's going to do is your blood volume is going to expand during that acclimation period. That expansion and just that increase in overall blood volume is going to help for better fuel and oxygen delivery, but also too, with more blood, means that the body's going to be able to distribute that throughout the body better, to be able to pull the blood to the surface. It's why when it's hot out and you see kind of like your veins starting to pop a little bit more, because it's trying to bring that blood to the surface, so any wind or air getting on the surface of your skin is able to essentially cool your blood down, cool your core temperature down, cool your body down. That's like when you have some hot food, you blow on it to cool it down. That's what the body's trying to do. It's bringing that blood to the surface. Those veins are starting to pop a little bit to try to expose it to air to bring that temperature down. So the blood volume expands to help with that. And as a result, it helps to bring that core temperature down. So all of these are real physiological changes that are occurring. And yes, it's going to seem like, well, you're just getting used to the temperature. And the reason you're getting used to it is because your body is adapting to respond better to it. So how long does it take for all this to occur? It differs from person to person. So it's always difficult to be able to say there's going to be a little wiggle room, but in general, about 2 weeks is kind of that time span to be able to really help the body adapt and acclimate. This is primarily a reason where a lot of professional teams, when they have preseason, allocate at least 2 weeks in a hot environment. That's why teams travel for preseason, not just because, yeah, it's going to be brutal physically on them. Like, let's go ahead and have an all-inclusive resort at least be the place that we're staying to be able to provide a nice little accommodation. While that is nice, it's really to be able to give the heat exposure. They want to induce that acclimation to get their bodies primed to be ready to go when the regular season hits. The first 3 to 5 days of that 2-week stretch is when some of those first meaningful adaptations start to occur. It's where the sweat becomes a little bit more efficient, that blood volume starts to expand a little bit, but it's not complete. Around 6 to 10 days is where we get closer to that finish line, where some of those changes are really starting to occur and you start to feel a little bit better out there. And cardiovascularly, you really start to be able to push yourself more without feeling as though you're hitting a wall as quickly. And then 2 weeks into it, aerobic performance and everything, feeling good. So again, some people it may take a little bit longer, other people may be quicker, but it's roughly going to be about 2 weeks. And part of what causes that quicker adaptation for some individuals is truly, were you heat adapted last summer? The body is incredible from the standpoint of, if it was exposed to something at some time, it's going to be able to get back to that state quicker. It remembers what that was like. So if you were heat acclimated and heat adapted last summer, your body's going to make those changes a little bit quicker. It knows what to do. It knows what to expect and how to get there. If you've never done that, it could take a little bit longer. So in general, give yourself about 2 weeks of intentional outdoor heat exposure before that first big hot weather event. So what is that going to cost you if you don't allow for that accommodation? It's going to cost you big time from a performance perspective. There was one study looking at it where unadapted athletes saw a 16% drop in their overall high intensity running, how many sprints they were able to, the distance that they covered with some of those sprints, and their ability to do those repeated sprints as well as some explosive jumps and movements. A 16% drop, that is huge. And then when looking at just the total distance covered in a match, it was 6% less. Again, another very significant and meaningful number. So what this means is that these things are going to play a role in how you perform on the weekend if you don't take that adaptation seriously. You want to make sure that you give your body time to be able to adjust, to accommodate to that temperature. So if you have a big tournament or a showcase event, you're able to put on full display what your actual capabilities are. Your fitness very well could be perfectly on point, but if you've been training indoors only that entire time, and then you're about to come into a tournament that's outdoors, completely different. You're not going to be able to showcase that fitness because physiologically your body's going to be getting taxed a whole lot more. So we want to close that gap in preparation for that and make sure that we're going into it adapted. The next thing is making sure too that we're going into all these things well hydrated. Common sense, nothing crazy, I'm sure. But when it's hot out, we really want to make sure that we're staying hydrated. And a lot of times, especially from the youth side of things, so many players are showing up dehydrated. We need to be intentional and very mindful of that, because if we are showing up dehydrated, it is absolutely going to impact our performance. And not only our performance, it's going to impact our recovery. Because what they saw in one study was looking at two groups where one group came in a little bit more hydrated versus the other. And it wasn't as though they were intentionally doing it, but they just separated based on the athletes coming in, like who was hydrated, who wasn't. And what they saw was that the dehydrated group was still able to push themselves and get themselves going to be able to cover the same distance, produce a relatively similar output energy-wise. But the response physiologically at the end of it was a huge increase in overall cortisol within the body in the dehydrated individuals. What that means is that with that elevated cortisol, it's going to take so much more effort for the body to be able to actually recover and repair and be ready to go again for the next day, the next game, the next practice, or what it may be. So even though both groups were able to, yes, finish the match, relatively similar output and everything, that dehydrated group really put themselves behind the eight ball to try and be able to perform again, especially if this is like a tournament weekend and they have another game coming right around the corner. They're going to be in a tough spot to be able to make sure that they're optimally recovered to perform just as well for that second game. So being properly hydrated, it is absolutely going to be able to aid your performance, decrease the risk of soft tissue injury risk, but it's also proactively helping you to be able to recover well. It's going to keep that cortisol level down, so afterwards you can get right into that recovery piece to be topped off and ready to go for game two. So a big thing with all this is gaining a sense and understanding of where do you stand now. And the best way to do that, and the simplest way, is with a morning urine check. Just look at what the color of your urine is. Super simple, super basic, nothing crazy. If you look at the urine in the morning and it is a pale straw yellow type color, you're doing awesome. Like, that is beautiful. If you wake up and it's a dark yellow and apple juice type color, we've got some work to do. And that's going to be the indicator that we really need to hit that water and the hydration hard right off the bat. So to help stay on top of that, one thing that I'd recommend is to start to get a sense of how much are you sweating during practice? How much do you need to be drinking during the training sessions, or how much do you need to drink afterwards to replenish what you lost? The best way to do that is with weighing in and weighing out of your practices. And what I mean is weigh yourself before the training session and then weigh yourself again at the end of the training session in relatively minimal clothing, just to make sure that you're not getting the added weight of the sweat still sitting on your clothes when you weigh in. Because what that's going to do, that difference, that weight loss that occurs, that's not going to be a true weight loss from the standpoint of you did not just lose 3 pounds of fat in one training session. What that indicates is you lost 3 pounds of fluid. And the general rule of thumb to keep in mind is for every pound of weight that you lose during a training or during a game, you need to consume 1 to 1.5 standard 16-ounce water bottles. That's going to be able to help replenish and get that hydration back up, so you can make sure that when you wake up the next day, you're in a pretty good spot hydration-wise. The other thing is to keep an eye on your jersey or your shirt or your hat. If you notice any white streaks starting to pop up on those or around the collar or anything like that, it's not sunscreen. What that is sweat or sodium deposits. When you sweat, we lose salt, we lose sodium. And some individuals are just salty sweaters. And notice that salt deposit in the residue on their clothes a lot more. If you notice that, that is an indicator that you are a lucky individual who needs to consume extra sodium. It's not good, it's not bad, it's indifferent. It's more so just knowing this is how your body responds. And you need to make sure to accommodate that by increasing your sodium intake to offset that loss. And this is why we want to be very mindful of how you specifically respond to all of this and what your specific hydration needs are. Because it's very difficult to be able to just have a one standard recommendation or a one set, hey, do this from a hydration protocol rule for everybody. Because for heavy sweaters, it's going to underserve them. Like you are going to underhydrate. And for light sweaters, they may overhydrate, both of which, in their respective amounts, are going to cause challenges, cause issues. So it's the Goldilocks method, not too much, not too little, just right. Because again, everyone's going to respond differently. Everyone's going to sweat differently. Everybody's just physiology and body size is different. And we want to make sure that you're hydrating appropriately. A typical rule of thumb, and again, not a one rule fits all, but a general rule of thumb as a great starting point and reference point is drink half of your body weight in ounces of fluid every day. That is a great starting point and just a point of reference to at least get close. And then once you're there, then it's tweaking things a little bit here and there to be able to find what your specific body needs. But that's a great place to be able to start with the understanding of you may need more or you may need a little less. Now, how do you decide and determine if you need water or sports drinks? In general, it's going to come down to the situation at hand, both from a training perspective and the environment. So if it's a short and cool session, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be perfectly fine with just water. As we increase the duration of that training session and as the temperature increases, electrolytes, sodium in particular, are going to become more and more important and should be more and more present in what you're consuming and drinking. Sports drinks fall into that category as well. If you are increasing your overall training intensity, training duration, we want to make sure that we've got the carbohydrate piece in there as well as the electrolyte piece. Those two things are going to be able to help complement the training session at hand to make sure that you're just fueling your body optimally, giving it everything that it needs so you can go and perform optimally. So you don't need electrolytes 24/7. You also don't need sports drinks 24/7. But what you need to do is be mindful of what is the situation at hand, what are you being asked to do, or what are you asking your body to do, and what beverage makes the most sense for that. And if you happen to notice some salt cravings and things like that after your session, that can be a signal that you need to listen to that your body wants and needs more sodium. So the body is always trying to talk to us. A lot of times we just kind of ignore it and don't do a great job listening. Pay attention to it. So the next thing, as heat increases, so too does the fueling demand. We just mentioned everything physiologically, what the body's going through, and some of those early stressors that occurs as we're getting acclimated. One of the processes, or what kind of drives all of that, requires energy. For the body to be able to get rid of that heat, of helping the heart become a little bit more efficient and everything, it takes energy. Everything within the body that occurs requires energy. And when the body is under stress, which it is at those high temperatures, it requires more energy. So whether that stress is, again, temperature, or if the stress is like mental and psychological, if we've got school going on, we've got finals week, what have you, if there's a lot of mental stress, that's going to increase the energy demands. If there's a lot of physical stress of what we were just talking about from a training perspective, if that training load increases, the training duration increases, the stress on the body goes up. So too does our fueling needs. Same thing here. Hotter temperatures, greater stress on the body, greater energy needs. And in particular, carbohydrates. Because again, it comes back to that stress aspect. The more intense the training session, the more stress on the body. The greater the stress, the greater the body's going to start to utilize some of those carbohydrates. So during that adaptation period, when the heat is more stressful on the body, the carb needs are going to be a little bit higher. And this can be a very challenging position and a challenging just topic in general for some individuals. And it's far from uncommon. There was one study looking at elite female soccer players in particular. During a match, the general recommendation is if you're trying to compete at a high level, if you consume about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour, that's going to be the body's kind of sweet spot of consuming carbs to provide the energy to be able to balance out what you're expending. On paper, that's the goal. In this study, they were noticing that most of the players were consuming 2 grams of carbs per hour, significantly under what would be recommended for optimal performance. So this really just raises that awareness piece of, Okay, there is an area for potential improvement there, both from just making sure that the awareness piece is there of, hey, the body's under a little bit more stress, we need to consume a little bit more, and then just in general, what the body needs and how much we should be consuming to be able to get the most out of the body. And so here for that 2-week preparation of what's this going to look like? What should I be focusing on to be able to help with that adaptation and acclimation period? Number one, having the intentional outdoor training. If we're trying to acclimate the body to heat, we need heat. We need that exposure to the heat. So at least 60 minutes a day, starting 2 weeks out. Indoor sessions aren't going to drive the same adaptations as the real heat itself. So try and get outside as best you can, give the body that exposure. The next thing is starting to have a consistent morning routine of truly just checking your hydration level. Check the color of your urine. Are you waking up in a relatively good spot? Or are you constantly waking up with your urine looking like apple juice? That's going to be a big indicator of either we need to increase what we're consistently drinking day in and day out, or just reinforce as a nice little peace of mind that, yeah, we're in a good spot. Then the next thing is pre-training fluid. You want to be drinking throughout the entire day. But in particular, about 2 to 3 hours before training, really make sure that you've got a water bottle on hand and you're just kind of constantly sipping on it to be able to ensure that when training begins, you're not last minute trying to chug a bottle of water and thinking you're great. Slow and steady, consistently, early and often, that's going to allow your body to optimally actually absorb and take up the water and fluid that you are consuming. So 2 to 3 hours out, grab the bottle of water and start to sip on it. Then on tournament weekends, make sure that we are pairing some sodium containing foods in between games to really help replenish those electrolytes, but also that sodium is just going to help the body absorb and pull in that fluid that we're consuming. So things like pretzels and goldfish, sports drinks, those are all going to be great things that are containing that sodium to be able to help. So with all that, here are just kind of some of the common questions that tend to pop up about this. The first one being, how many days does it take for a soccer player to adjust to the heat? This was a big thing that we touched on here in the slides. It's going to take about 2 full weeks for the body to be able to get all those adaptations. Now, depending upon if you were heat adapted last year, that may be quicker. If you've never done that before, it may take a little bit longer. But in general, that kind of benchmark of where to set your mind around is expect 2 weeks. Then, should soccer players drink water or a sports drink during a match in the heat? With this, you will absolutely want to have that sports drink on hand. It's a combination of the heat plus the intensity and the duration of that soccer match gets us to that lovely 90-minute mark. When we have longer sessions, when we have high heat sessions, we want to make sure that we've got the combination of some carbohydrates on hand as well as the electrolytes to be able to optimize both our fueling and energy needs plus the hydration piece. Then this is a big one too. Are young athletes more at risk in the heat than adults? In general, no, not when proper hydration and recovery strategies are in place. Youth athletes can be perfectly fine going out and competing in the heat, but you need to be cautious 100% on that because dependent upon how young we're getting, their sweat glands haven't fully developed. So they may not be sweating as much to be able to then allow that heat dispersion. So if we aren't mindful about taking adequate hydration breaks and cool down breaks, yeah, younger athletes absolutely can overheat. But in general, as a blanket statement, you don't need to completely avoid the heat. You just need to be cautious. Like if it's 105 degrees outside, you probably don't want to go for a marathon length run. Like use a little bit of common sense on that one, but be mindful, be cautious. But in general, you don't need to completely avoid the high heat with youth athletes. Then, how do I know if my athlete is starting a game already dehydrated? So this is kind of a common question that I get from some parents that pop up. The best way is just asking your athlete to check their urine color. So as we mentioned before, if it's a straw, pale yellow color, that's perfect. We don't want it crystal clear, and we also don't want it super dark like apple juice. We want that sweet spot. So if they're maintaining that color consistently, they're going to be well hydrated and ready to go to take on the day.